Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zizi Pochoye. I am from South Africa, and I will be your youth moderator this evening. Basically, what landscape talks are, they are a fun, vibrant, and effective way of delivering world-changing ideas in just 7 to 10 minutes. But for the purposes of this evening, it will be strictly 7 minutes. But don't worry, there's going to be a gentle reminder from my colleagues here when you have 2 minutes left. Basically, the session for today is titled More Than Wood, which focuses on sustainable land use and livelihoods. Our first speakers are Mr. Lance Robinson, who is a senior scientist at the International Livestock Research Institute, and Mr. Jason Sersely, who is an agricultural, ecologic, and conservation biologist. They will be speaking on the axis for sustainable, pastoralist, rangeland landscapes. So please give a warm welcome to our speakers.
Hello, everyone, and hi, Jason. I've been wanting to discuss something with you, and this topic, more than trees, it feeds in exactly with what I wanted to talk to you about, and I hope you don't mind if they listen. As this conference, as you know, is focused on promoting sustainable landscapes in Africa, and a key strategy in doing that is the landscape approach. As I'm sure most of you know, using a landscape approach implies working in a particular geographic space, a landscape, to integrate across sectors, to integrate diverse interests, and to integrate the different ecosystem types that you may find in that space. It's an approach that could be applied in any kind of setting, any kind of ecological or climatic zone, but here's the thing. Until now, a lot of the thinking about landscape approaches and a lot of the experience implementing landscape approaches has related to two things, farms and forests. Until now, two things have been at the center, trees and crops.
That's right, Lance, although I'm interested in how to apply a landscape approach in a different kind of setting, pastoralist rangelands. How much of the Earth's land do you suppose is in rangelands?
I don't know, say maybe like about a third?
Over half, and most of Africa. Most rangelands are drylands, and quite different from humid zones with a lot of forests and crops everywhere. But more important than how dry rangelands are is how variable they are. Rangelands receiving lower rainfall also receive much more variable rainfall. One year a drought, the next year a flood. Here it can rain, 1 kilometer away is completely dry. This extreme variability in dry rangelands is the main reason why calculating a stable carrying capacity is at best not helpful to management and at worst misleading.
You know, those characteristics bring with them a number of ways that pastoralist rangelands are also socially and institutionally distinct. With that great variability from place to place and from year to year, with that variability, the way pastoralists create a livelihood is by moving their livestock adaptively and opportunistically, sometimes great distances. And as a result, what constitutes a meaningful landscape in those kind of settings often is huge. And with the mobility and the place-to-place and year-to-year variability, you also get a number of ways that pastoralist rangelands are institutionally distinct.
For example?
For example, a lot of pastoralist cultures and societies, they don't put a lot of emphasis on ownership and clear boundaries, knowing exactly what resource belongs to whom. Instead, the emphasis is on securing access to grazing resources. The institutions and systems for managing resources can also be very flexible. Social group membership that's fluid, ways of making decisions that are flexible and to outside eyes may appear very ad hoc. The norms in pastoralist cultures also can emphasize access, so much so that in some pastoralist settings, if a pastoralist comes to your area from another place with their livestock, your norms and your institutions, rather than emphasizing your ownership of that resource and your right to manage it, they may instead emphasize your obligation to allow them to come and graze.
And so the importance of mobility and access means that a landscape approach will need to look different in pastoralist rangelands than it does in other settings. In my view, more effective landscape approaches will build upon people's livelihoods, their cultures, their aspirations. Each of these shift gradually over time, yet the present will determine much of the future.
Jason, you're exactly right. And that's why, in pastoralist rangelands, livestock need to be at the center of landscape approaches.
But Lance, you're the social scientist here. I'd think you'd say that people should be at the center.
Yeah. In a pastoralist rangeland, if you put livestock at the center, then you are putting people at the center. Let me explain with a story. I used to spend a lot of time with Gabra pastoralist communities in northern Kenya. One day, I was with a group of children, and I asked them a question. I asked them, what is it about your land, what is it that makes your land beautiful? A couple of the kids mentioned trees. That night, I was talking with an elder of the community, and I told this to him. I told him what the children had said. And he thought for a minute, and he said, it's true, trees make the land beautiful, but camels make our life beautiful. You see, Jason, the way I see it, for pastoralists, it's all about their livestock and keeping them healthy. If the rest of us, scientists, conservationists, NGO people, government officers, if we can understand that, then we can better understand how mobility is key for dealing with access. We can better understand how their institutions emphasize access and the flexibility of those systems. Pastoralists, I don't think it's helpful to see them as just a different kind of farmer. Pastoralists don't see themselves as grass farmers. For pastoralists, it's all about the livestock. The land is important, but it's important because it maintains livestock.
And that doesn't mean that ecosystem health or sustainability need to be sacrificed for the sake of livestock. Putting livestock at the center, keeping livestock healthy, and the mobility that comes from that imperative to keep them healthy can bring several ecosystem benefits. Grazing lands often have huge stores of carbon in the soil that cropping those areas would release. They often support moderate or high densities of wildlife that would not exist if it's changed to farmland. And then you have the risk of massive uncontrollable wildfires when grazing is removed from dry rangelands, as we're now seeing in the news from Europe and North America. Better organized grazing can actually improve upon these and other environmental benefits from grazing lands while maintaining or increasing livestock production.
Jason, these dynamics that you're talking about, they're an ever-changing thing. And I don't think you and I are talking about maintaining traditional pastoralism as some kind of museum piece. Pastoralist communities are undergoing change, just as all other communities are undergoing change. They're participating more in markets. As farming comes in, and more land is taken over to farming, you get a different mix of stakeholders that becomes relevant. But this is what landscape approaches are about. Integrating a changing mix of stakeholders, integrating shifting interests, integrating these shifting conditions. And you're right, people should be at the center. But that means understanding people's aspirations, and for pastoralists, that means livestock are key. But that in turn means that our landscape approaches need to adapt. To finish up, I'm going to give one little example of how they may need to adapt. As I mentioned, for pastoralists, boundaries can be very flexible and fuzzy, if they're there at all. That may mean that as you're doing a landscape approach, there may be no clear dividing line between one landscape and the next. So as we landscape approach people, we come with our participatory methods and our stakeholder engagement strategies. The particular mix of stakeholders we're dealing with, even the particular piece of land we're focusing on, may be something that's always shifting. The whole engagement and planning process is likely to be a lot more flexible and fluid than it is for a landscape approach in some other settings.
And so as time goes by and things keep changing, Livestock can be a core element of helping to make landscape approaches more relevant to the people who live in those landscapes.
Livestock such as camels?
Definitely.
And that makes our lives beautiful.
And our landscape approaches.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was very, very interesting talk. Our next speaker is Teresa Gitonga from the International Tree Foundation, and the talk will be on why and how communities can be involved in large-scale landscape restoration initiatives. Please help me welcome Ms. Gitonga.
I am the manager of International Tree Foundation, in charge of a campaign whereby we are planting 20 million trees in and around Kenya water towers or forests. And we are doing this together with the community members. We are doing this together with the local institutions. And also you are welcomed to be part of this. We are going to do this by 2024. Our target is to plant 20 million trees by 2024. We are not only planting trees, but we are making changes in terms of improving the livelihood of 50,000 community members. We are also, this will be contributing also toward improving the life of women, ensuring that we are improving the livelihoods of those specific women who are going very long distance in search of water. And this, we have already started the initiative, and in the last 2 years, by the end of this year, we'll be able to have done our first million. We have already planted 1 million trees, and this is in Mount Kenya region, together with our partners. And it is very interesting. I was there last week, and the survival rate is very impressive. It's about 90 to 95% in some areas. In the schools, the success is very impressive. We are also working with the youth and young people. We are working with the school kids to plant trees, to make sure they are interested in planting trees in their schools, because we want to develop a generation that will be able not only to plant trees, but they will be able to ensure that those trees grow. And we are using a community-based approach as well as landscape-based approach. And despite Kenya adopting participatory forest management more than 10 years ago, we still continue losing our biodiversity. The rivers that used to be permanent, some of them have dried up, others are now seasonal. Women continue to travel very many kilometers in search of water, in search of firewood. We are losing tons and tons, thousands of tons of soil because of erosion. We have to change this narrative. And this project, this specific program, is contributing towards changing this narrative. We are contributing towards our country commitment. You know, Kenya have already committed to plant 1.1, to rehabilitate or to restore 5.1 million hectares. We are part of that. And this, we have to work together with the community. We don't have a choice. If we ignore the communities, then we will not succeed. Based on my experience working with the communities for many years, if you ignore them, you will not survive. You will not be able to survive this. So we need to ensure that there's deeper engagement of the communities. And what is deeper engagement of the communities? We want to see tangible benefit for the communities in terms of livelihood improvement. If the communities are not getting any livelihood benefits, be sure they will not participate. We also want to make sure that the communities understand the long-term ecosystem services. So when they understand that whatever they are doing, the destruction, deforestation that is happening, that they are destroying their future generations' life, they are destroying their life, then they will be able to support the initiatives that we are doing in terms of landscape restoration. We know that some people have been able to introduce the issue of incentives in terms of money, but money is not everything. We have other benefits that we can be able to introduce to the communities, including those ecosystem service, payment for ecosystem services through other means, supporting them. There are a lot of non-wood benefits that is in the forests. Our forests have a lot of benefits. So if the communities understand all those benefits, that will be able to add value to whatever we are doing in terms of landscape restoration. We also need to have a very good coordination between the government, non-governmental organizations, research institutions, and also academia. We need all of us, and involving the communities. If we are able to coordinate ourselves, then be sure that we will be able to succeed. We need also to involve the communities in planning, actual implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of all these initiatives. That is what we are doing. Participatory forest management should be very genuine. Are we really involving the communities? We have seen some of these management plans expiring before they are implemented. So we need to see genuine participation in terms of these management plans, and they should be simplified to a language that the communities understand, not a 50 or 200 pages document that nobody understands. So they should be accessible to all interested parties in landscape restoration. And maybe to conclude, we need to make sure that we are building the capacity of our community forest associations. We are building the capacity of our water resource users association, because there is a capacity gap. We need to train them in terms of environmental stewardship and also transformative leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gitonga. We really cannot emphasize how important community engagement is, especially in changing the narrative. So thank you very much for your talk. Our next speaker is Eric Omolo, who is a research fellow at the Department of Land Resource and Management of Agricultural Technology, who will be deliberating on collective action and digital platforms towards enhanced fodder farming for better livelihoods and land management. Please help me welcome Eric.
Well, can you get it? Okay. Well, thank you so much. I want you to have a look at the picture. I don't know whether you can see. If you can read what is written. This is one of the Kenya dailies, somewhere August last year, 2017. The title was saying, drought puts millions of Kenyans at risk of starvation. And then a subtitle was down somewhere saying that cattle now going for only $5 approximately in Kajiado County. So just try to figure out the value, like one cattle going for $5. And I think looking at that drives us to, I want to use that to take us to the landscape that I'm talking about. I want to talk about pastoral and agro-pastoral regions or parts of Kenya. That is mainly northern Kenya and such related areas, where livestock production is the main source of livelihood for the people there. And we are talking of a place that's taking about almost 90% of Kenya is dry. So you find people living there, about 25, almost 25% of Kenyans living there. And now what they live on, which is livestock, going for $5. That is a challenge. So why are we there? What is the challenge? The challenge is, if you can have a look at what is on the picture there, we are talking of degraded lands which are, in quotes, with no life, yeah, in terms of there's no pasture. These lands have been divided so that the traditional systems of, say, fodder production or management, like things like communal grazing systems and as traditional systems for managing pastures are no longer practicable, or they're no longer reliable. So these are major problems that we are talking about. So, but then the government of Kenya, in collaboration with partners, have tried, almost about 3 decades ago, came up with an idea that we can do pasture production as a way of curbing this challenge. And what was the idea behind this? One is to do fodder production to ensure all-season availability of pasture in terms of livestock feed. 2, this was done as a way of addressing degradation, as you can see there. So that was the second aim. And the third aim was to use fodder production as an alternative source of livelihood so that people could do fodder farming in a market-oriented approach. But then this has not worked. 3 years or about 3 decades down the line, we are still talking of starvation in terms of lack of livestock feed and related resources. So we are asking sometimes, I think about 2 years ago, we did a study. We were looking at what is the issue. These approaches have been here for about 3 decades. What is the problem? So we found out that these approaches, which are very good, are not working out because of lack of, proper and sustainable ways of letting people pick up the ideas, use them, and be able to benefit from these approaches. Then we now moved into getting a solution ourselves. So we have a model which is actually right now into implementation or into trial. We are doing a pilot. We have come up with an approach which is collecting or putting together, or collective action. We want to put farmers together in terms of social groups that are oriented or interested in fodder farming. And 2, the next approach is to come up with a digital platform. So the approach is to put a collective action digital platform as a combined way of enhancing access to information. What would be the benefit of doing collective action? We have social groups in these areas. And what we want to do is to capacitate them in terms of increasing their capacity, increasing their effectiveness, and deliver in terms of what they can do in enhancing local members to do fodder farming for the reasons that we had mentioned before. Secondly, fodder farming, this is an approach where we want to create a digital platform. The digital platform here is mobile-based and also a website where all the stakeholders can engage. So that we have a system where we have a farmer directly talking to a policymaker, directly talking to somebody from the government, to an investor and extension officer and all that. So that we narrow, because one of the problems that we found out was that there was a break, there was a gap between the local farmer or that pastoralist whom we want to get the information. So the gap of lack of access to information is why we are moving into bring the collective action and and digital platform, putting this together to enhance the interaction. So far, one thing that we've done is we've done stakeholder analysis so that we know who are these people involved in fodder farming in terms of their influences, their roles, and then now we get the entry point in so that we can enhance adoption of these practices. So, and where are we aiming to? We are aiming to where we have the collective action, where now we have these farmers working together, doing fodder farming together, selling, having enough for their livestock, selling excess or extra to get an alternative source of livelihood, and having those degraded lands properly improved. So that the second picture below you see is one of the farmers, one of the best farmers that we're using, to pilot and enhance what we are working on. So this is an ongoing work that we would want everybody else, including yourselves, to engage so that we see how we can upscale and outscale these ideas for the benefit of because these are some of the things that we can try elsewhere, because they are working things. So that's why I'm asking you as an individual, what could be your contribution towards this? How can we engage in terms of ideas so that we can, move on with some of these things? So below is the website through which that is a developed website that we're already working on. We're already engaging farmers and stakeholders. And this is where we can engage further, because we are in different places and we want to make these things work better for everybody else elsewhere across. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Esther Kasalu, who is the country director for IFAD. And the talk will be focusing on healthy landscapes for resilient livelihoods, from the youth project approach to integrated programming at IFAP. Please welcome to the podium, Esther.
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me? Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. I've been introduced, but I don't think IFAD has been introduced. Somebody asked me what is IFAD. So maybe just a few seconds on IFAD. IFAD is International Fund for Agricultural Development, and we are a specialized UN agency, but we are also an international financial institution. So we invest through governments most of the time in rural development, focusing mainly on smallholder producers in the rural areas. Now, given the topic, the healthy, I like the way it has been cast. First and foremost, we all know that in about 30 years, we are going to have a population in Africa that is going to double from 1.26 million to 2.5 billion people. And at the same time, as you have heard from other speakers, we have a situation where we have increasing land degradation and ecosystems that are, land degradation and biodiversity that we are losing, and also the effects of climate change. So what do? As an international development agency, we also make a contribution to this, and we are trying to see how we can effectively make a contribution to the challenges that this situation poses. We have experienced that, when we talk about the landscape, that really, if we look at it, is that in development, there's a very direct link between the management of natural resources and the livelihood of the smallholder farmers that we target and whom we invest in most of the time. And as such, how do we effectively, contribute to these, to ameliorating these challenges that are definitely, before us. Now, IFAD uses a project approach in investing. Most of our projects are managed and implemented by governments. We provide technical support, including some of our development partners along the way. Now, a project means it's time-bound, it is spatial, and it is also, there's an economic aspect to it. However, these boundaries that we have put around around a project in the investments are posing quite a lot of challenges, in the sense that some of the challenges that we have, they don't have, the time that we have 5 years to implement a project. Usually you find that there's not enough time for us. Teresa will tell you that to grow trees, if we want to do reforestation, takes time. So what do we do during during the time that the trees have to grow before the beneficiaries, the smallholder producer in the rural areas can see the benefits? From a project standpoint, what we do is we provide some incentives. We offer incentives where sometimes it could be subsidies or maybe alternative income-generating activities. This is fine, but a tree takes time to grow. So what do we do? So in a case like that, this is why we are exploring some of the, instead of having a project approach, to extending into a program approach, which goes much further than the 5 years that is a standard project time frame. Then there's the space. The very terminology of saying rural development, it means we are delineating the urban areas. We don't work, we by our mandate, we always work in the rural areas, not in the urban areas. But really, when we talk about natural resource management, they are very linked. There's no way you would see that because of this rural-urban migration that has taken place in the last maybe 4 decades, the people who are investing in the rural areas are the people who are in urban areas. But they themselves, when we talk about natural resources, water and land, we share the use of these resources. For example, water. Water, normally comes from the rural areas, and those are the upstream people who use the water before it gets to the cities. So that's something that we would like to look at, special, that we really need to identify and recognize the linkages that the urban areas and the rural areas have in this landscape. Then the economy. The economy, again, like I said, when we invest, we always talk about the rural areas, but those that are investing are the people they are often coming from the urban areas. So the approach that IFAD is taking, and we have done this in a number of regions in West Africa, Niger, in Burkina Faso and Mali, we are looking at a situation where we have a smallholder managed natural resource management. And in so doing, we have managed to be able to invest in quite a number of countries, and thank you, I've got it. In a number of countries, but really the gist of the matter here is we want to invest in rural poor, but we have to recognize the integration that we need to invest in integrated rural development, and also consider the program approach other than a project approach. I think. Thank you very much. I think I would just like, finally to show you that for those of you who are interested, I'm going to put up some of these. We have a flyer here, and you can also go to our website. It will be, they will let you at least it will show you some of the projects that we have invested in this landscape. And finally, you can see there, this is one of the investments that we are making right here in Kenya, that where the urban areas, the use of the water in urban areas is benefiting upstream smallholder farmers who are, more or less subsistence farmers. But it has become a win-win situation. And, we have, the smallholder farmers making money out of the investments that is coming in, resource management of land and water, but also in the urban areas, we have those that are using water. They have good quality and good quantity of water coming to the cities. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther, for your talk. Next, speaking on why I chose sustainable farming over the suit and tie is Mr. Lawrence Afere from Springboard, Nigeria. Even though today it looks like he did choose the suit. Please welcome Mr. Afere.
Okay. Hello, good evening. Okay, sorry. Can you put this? Okay. Okay. I was actually lucky to get this picture from my dad. So that's me when I was 3 years old. And you can see my parents. I was born in 1983, and then precisely on the 8th of May. And so that day was a very special day for my parents. As I was born, they took me to a traditionalist. My parents are traditionalists, so they took me to the future tellers, that the fortune tellers, to inquire of what will become of my future. And then when my parents got there, the man told my parents that this boy is going to be a great man. And so my parents immediately assumed that I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. In those times, if you were going to be great, you should practice one of those professions. And so my parents did not ask what I would do. They jumped out, and then they began to tell me that you will be great, you will be rich, you will be the one to take care of the family. I'm the fifth born. I have elder brothers and sisters, but because of what they told my parents, my dad had to save so much money to send me to one of the best universities in the school. And so every day he would tell me, Lawrence, you will be rich, you will be great, you would take care of your younger ones and take care of the family. And so that mentality got into me. So when I got to the university in 2003, I began to study and to read very hard. I wanted to work in the bank or oil and gas sector. And in the first year, I read very well, got good results, second year, third year. And so at the end of the third year, something changed. It was precisely Friday, November 17, 2006, when the entire dream and mindset changed. I read an article about the plight that young Nigerians were faced with, and it was written by the then Minister of Education, Ezekwesili Obiageli. She analyzed that every year Nigeria graduates more than 1 million young people out of the high school and the university. And less than 30% of them could gain admission to study in the university. Less than 30% of them could get a good job. And so she said that by the year 2020, Nigeria, my dear country, would have raised highly skilled, more than 20 million highly skilled, not doctors, not lawyers, not farmers, not entrepreneurs, highly skilled criminals that could devour the entire country by 2020. At that moment, I dropped out of classes. I wanted to do something about it. So the dream around becoming rich changed. And so I began to read books on entrepreneurship because I wanted to do something. And so when I left the university in 2007, I didn't know what to do. I wanted an opportunity for young people so that I could help them to have new mindset about themselves and give them opportunity to discover livelihood opportunities. So I began to sell books, but that couldn't help them. And so I read another article about farming, and I saw that Nigeria had over 84 million hectares of farmland, and we import food into the country. Our food import bill is more than 16 billion USD. And I asked myself, this is a huge opportunity. Surface water is so huge. The young people, more than 50 million of them, so dynamic and so energetic. And so I started a project called the Youth Farm Project. I began to bring young people together on a borrowed farmland. And so I would take them to the farm on Fridays and Saturdays. We will farm together, eat together, sell some of these crops, and take part of the money back into the project. And we began to build it. And in 2012, I got a scholarship to study social entrepreneurship in India. And so when I got back, I transformed the model. I got dynamic young people together, and we began to work. And we changed the name of the project from the Youth Farm to Springboard. And so we said we are a network of young organic farmers in Nigeria. We're practicing agroforestry, sustainable agriculture, and currently we will get young people every year, between 200 and 500 of them. We will train them. We will give them the support that they need to start their own organic farms in clusters. And we form cooperatives. We provide advisory services to farmers that we convert into organic farmers. And we also train women, rural women, to become entrepreneurs. So we provide support for them to start off-farm businesses during non-season. And we also have a project that is called the Farm to School project that we start in secondary schools in Nigeria. We want to build interest in young Nigerians to have passion for farming. If you ask Nigerian students who are studying agriculture, it's not by passion. So we want to help to build that interest in them. And we also do processing. We buy back some of the products from our farmers and convert into new products. We also have a school for our farmers' children. We also have a bank, too. We have a rural bank system in partnership with one of the commercial banks in Nigeria. And we've received a lot of visitors in our project. The U.S. ambassador to Nigeria, current one, has also visited us recently. For me, I see that landscape is much more than planting tree. It has much to do about livelihoods and mindset. And so for us to actually transform the landscape in Africa, we need a movement, a dynamic movement. And so I see what I do is much more than a training program. It's much more than food production. I am creating a movement for a new country, for a new Nigeria. And so I see a nation that has millions of young people all over the place who are empowered to take their destinies in their hands, who are empowered to become whatever they want to be, and who are ready to help the country to become great, to become safe, to become green, and to become prosperous. And so that's what I'm doing with my life, and that's what I'm doing with my project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for your very dynamic talk. I think we can all appreciate that he dropped the suit instead. It was a very good talk. So up next, we are going to have our question and answer session that is going to be facilitated. Please excuse us. I'm sorry, Ben. Please help me welcome to the podium our next speaker, who is Ben Roberts, the Chief Technical and Innovation Officer for Liquid Telecom Group. Please give Ben a warm hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought I was having a challenge to go last, but to follow that last presentation and go last has given me an even bigger challenge. So that was very inspiring. So yeah, I'm from Liquid Telecom. We're one of the sponsors here and doing the internet. But as Liquid, we have built a large amount of telecommunications infrastructure across all of Africa, and specifically infrastructure for fiber networks and data centers. So we started building fiber, and we've built 50,000 kilometers of fiber now across about 13 countries. So when you are building that much fiber connecting cities, long distances, you're crossing through a lot of rural areas, a lot of different habitats. We haven't crossed any deserts, I think, but we've crossed, deep forests, national parks, rivers, all sorts of different, areas, farming areas. So the first part of our core mission in terms of sustainable, networks to being built is in minimizing the impacts on the environment and the habitats that you're going through. So that means putting fiber deep under the ground or very high up in the air, and it means using existing infrastructure corridors. So we're using existing roads or existing power lines or railways, things that have already been built. So as we're building this infrastructure, we're digging alongside a roadway or digging alongside a railway, minimizing the impact of what we do on the environment. When it comes to building data centers as well, we're building them in a green way. Here in Kenya, we have a very privileged situation of having a lot of renewable energy in Kenya. We've minimized the use of the diesel by having solar and by having high grid connections. Bringing down the cost of, or the amount of electricity you use, you consume vast amounts of power in data centers, bringing that down so we minimize the impact on global warming and the environment. Then, as well, we also have to minimize the effect that the environment has on us. So, we have challenges doing fiber networks over long distances, and farmers are a big problem. They digging and dig and break and damage fibers. We've gone through national parks. So in the national parks, we've had elephants damaging our fiber. So, sometimes we've built to a certain specification, but there's been an elephant crossing. We've had to cover it in concrete. When the first rains come after you build fiber, a wash away happens and erosion is there. So you might have to relocate and replan the way you do things as the environment changes. And that's all part of maintenance of a fiber network across such a vast territory. But then with that comes the impact you're having on rural environments with bringing this connectivity and bringing this bringing this new infrastructure. And up there, there's a very old logo up here of what we used to have, which is Liquid Telecom. It's sort of there in the middle of the page. And when we first started building fiber across Africa, we had this logo where we had a drip underneath the letter Q. It's a drip of water because we were Liquid Telecom. And as we went out in our vehicles digging fiber across rural areas connecting cities, people would come running from the villages and saying, "Are you bringing water? Are you bringing water?" Because we were digging trenches and putting pipes into the ground, so they thought we were bringing water. Unfortunately, we disappointed them by telling them we were bringing fiber connectivity. But you got to bear in mind as well, these are areas that are on roadways, so they already have a transport system. They probably have electricity. They didn't have fiber networks, but they would have had some mobile connectivity. But water was the one thing that they didn't have available from the tap and as a running water service. But I think the effect of communication coming to rural areas and to agricultural areas is quite well documented. First with voice communications, and now with mobile data on the mobile networks, and the fiber networks and the purpose of the fiber networks and how they give connectivity in the rural area is to connect up from the roadways to the communications towers, enabling then that you can have high-speed internet, as well as the voice services were there before running with wireless networks. But by going to the communications towers and the high sites, you can extend the networks using wireless communications into rural areas. So that is bringing the connectivity. We've also then connected up a lot of research organizations and name quite a lot of the agencies here in Kenya, but there's so many that we've connected up and doing their research using the fiber connectivity and needing that broadband in rural areas. But I want to check everybody is still awake here. So who knows what is the Internet of Things? Put your hand up. Not so many. And how many people have seen an Internet of Things device today, an IoT or Internet of Things device? So nobody. Well, if you've seen one of these in your pocket, or if you've seen a CCTV camera or something, then you've seen an IoT device. And Internet of Things is really about using the internet and connectivity to connect the physical world with data centers and collecting data from the physical world, having the world tell us about what's going on. So in this phone, there are lots of sensors. You can count your steps. There's a GPS tracker. This transmits over the internet all this data. And you also, using sensors, whether it be on an animal or in the environment. I've got a couple of pictures there. One is an air quality monitoring sensor we're working with in Nairobi. A company called Code for Africa are mapping out air quality and pollution data in Nairobi using the networks. And there's a picture of a connected cow. So cows can't talk, but using the IoT, they can tell us if they're healthy, if they're moving, if they've got a high temperature. So there's ways you can communicate. So animals and physical world can tell us about what the status is using IoT. So I've been around today and been talking to a lot of people doing research and hearing about data collection and even hearing about long delays in data being collected and published and collated. And the IoT really enables data to come much faster. So a forest can tell you when it's on fire straight away. A forest can tell you when it's being destroyed straight away. The land will talk to us using this technology. By having sensors in rural areas that transmit over networks, that then pushes the data into cloud computing, which is all enabled by this fiber and data centers that we're talking about. That enables the data to be processed much, much faster and to be delivered, whether they be to researchers or be delivered to an app, which a farmer or a ranger or somebody in a rural environment is working and having an app on their phone. This infrastructure is enabling much faster collection of data and processing of data for research and benefit to rural environments. And I think I really want to, I don't want to keep anybody from their drinks and dinner. I'll end on that. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. And if anyone is wondering, Ben has forgiven me. So, yeah. So, I'm not forgetting anyone else. So now we are moving to our question and answer session, which is going to be facilitated by my colleague, Sarah, who is going to also introduce herself to you guys.
Okay, so from the country I come from, which is called Ghana, illegal small-scale gold mining, which is also known as galamsey, has been very rampant and is destroying our forests and our water bodies. Suddenly, young people have lost their dreams, and most of them are usually involved in this practice, which is producing school dropouts, and many of them have lost their vision for life. That is how come this theme for this year's conference, GLF, is very connected to me, and I'm sure we all are passionate about this theme. And from what we have seen and heard, our speakers have been very inspiring. They've shared with us their, what they are already doing on the grounds, and I'm sure most of us have taken something from them. So now I want to introduce you to this session, and this is the fun part. It's an interactive part whereby we are going to ask questions. The audience are going to ask questions, and then our wonderful speakers are going to respond to it. Before that, I would like to commend Lawrence for his challenging and inspiring presentation, and I'm sure you've challenged young people in this room and also across the globe, because a lot of people are watching online. So I would like to introduce you to this session, and the first rule is you have microphones on your desk, so if you have a question, you just press on any of the buttons and then you ask your question. Also, I would also recommend that one person to a question, so that everybody would have the opportunity to ask a question. And also, when you're asking your question, you should be very brief. And finally, before you ask the question, you have to mention your name and then organization, where you are coming from. So we begin. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Aisha Karanja from an organization called Back to Basics, where we are dealing with sustainable livelihoods and environmental stewardship and effective positive change through basics. And first of all, I want to thank the panelists for great insights. And I wanted to just ask, and it can be answered, I think other than Springboard, I would be happy to get answers from the other organizations, especially International Tree Foundation, about gender integration, to ensure that you're integrating gender. And when I talk about gender, I mean women and youth. I would want to know how you're doing this in your projects. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe have a response.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for that. We, as International Tree Foundation, gender integration in our landscape restoration is very important. As we all know, is that women are the primary caretaker of our family. We have women in our groups. We also have men. So men and women and youths, even the people with the challenges, we have them in our groups. And most of them, the people who feel more when it comes to the destruction of the environment are women. So basically, in most of our groups, women are more. I travel aloud with women as I go because I like interacting with them and understanding their needs. And I am accompanied by one of the women from the women group, and she can tell us how many women they have in their group, because I know they have some women in their groups and also men, but she can tell us how many they have.
Well, my name is Anastasia Joki. In our group, we have 300 women, of which only 25 are the men who are participating in the work of landscape restoration. Thank you.
Yes, you can ask.
Thank you. And mine is a follow-up question to the country manager, ITF. I know ITF has been very successful in many countries, and it's impressive that they've planted over 1 million trees in Kenya. But I'm interested in knowing how are you involving women, especially in agroforestry, because I think we cannot actually talk about successful restoration if we don't talk about agroforestry, because eventually the women have to get firewood from their farms to reduce pressure in the forest. Are you engaging in agroforestry?
Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Charles, for the good question. I want to say that in Kenya, one of the largest restoration area is on people's farm. So if we have to achieve landscape restoration, we have to focus on people's farm. But what trees do we plant? We have to plant trees that are benefiting the communities and also restoring their soil. So we are planting a lot of fruit trees. We are also planting very good trees that can be able to work well with crops, because you know most of our rural people have very small pieces of land. So we are doing that, and that is one of our major pillars in our program, and we are really intensifying even in other areas. Thank you so much.
You can ask. Yep.
My name is Betty Rono, and I'm in the field of academia. I'm from Kenya. And my question is to the rangeland management projects, which are the two groups. And the problem in the rangeland management actually basically is water. So Eric, you're proposing fodder production, which is amazing, and is really a vision that is doable, but where is the water? And then secondly, you are using an online platform. The farmers you're reaching out to, what capacity do they have to use this platform? And the same to the landscape restoration story, that was amazing, but how do you reach out to the people, especially the women? When you call them to a group, do they come to the same group as men and the youth?
Okay, may we have a response, please? Yes, from you.
Thank you, Betty, for the questions. I'll start by answering about the water. One thing that we are doing is that, of course, we are not introducing pasture production. It's something that was introduced about 3 decades ago, or even before then. But one thing that is done to ensure is this: when you want to introduce or enhance fodder production in these areas, number one, you must make sure that the grass species that you are introducing or you're encouraging are those that will survive in the system. So we have about 4 to 5 specific grass species that survive in the drylands, say those asals. And they're very specific. And of course, to do this, number one, you must find out from the locals themselves which grass species are they interested in and why, in terms of survivability under those minimal water moisture, and in terms of quality for livestock. So addressing the question of water is by introducing or enhancing those species that only, for example, need small amount of water to establish, then they do well. And then, two, alongside into enhancing further production, you also come, or we encourage through the platform of the system, water conservation approaches. For example, how to harvest rainwater, store it, and use it later or for further production. So that is, in my understanding, properly taken care of. Now, regarding we are introducing a digital platform among these local people. One, we are taking an approach of dealing with groups. We are not dealing with individuals. One of the reasons of dealing with groups is to enhance the ability in terms of resources or even learning from one another, because one thing we are encouraging is peer-to-peer learning. So in every group, we identify an individual with an ability to use a smartphone, so that he can be now like the representative of the entire group. Say there are 30 or so, so one person is leading, and then now he connects to the rest. You understand? So that approach is really, for us, it's working. Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody here want to answer me? The speakers want to answer to Betty? No one. Okay, so the next question. Oh, okay, sorry. Then you can.
I think, I'm not sure I totally understand your question, because you said water is the problem for growing grass, and really, I can say that's not really true. Rainfall has been decreasing in pastoral lands in East Africa, although global climate models predict that it will increase, or at least stay stable in the lowlands over the next several decades. So, yes, there is a water problem, but it is the increasing incidence of drought, combined with very high livestock densities. When you have a drought and you have a high density of livestock, that's when you have high quality perennial grasses dying. Rather than being eaten completely down to the ground, surviving and growing again, they just die. Especially when they grow again and they're eaten again and again. That's when you see rangeland condition really going down and things really getting bad. So, but the drought, obviously, we can't stop the droughts from coming. Climate change is there. It's not going anywhere. However, what people can do is better organize their grazing, and that's happening in a lot of places. When it comes to gender in pastoral settings, I can say it's quite challenging. First of all, you need to engage with the whole community, and so sometimes you can't just separate meetings. Sometimes you can if people are comfortable with it, but sometimes you really can't. You need to discuss with everyone present. And these are societies where often men are pretty dominant. So there is always a challenge there, but I don't, we do our best, but it's simply not easy. You have to discuss with literally almost everyone that you can. Yeah, so.
Thank you. My question goes to the presenter on liquid technology. I got so much impressed, but I was wondering, how affordable is it? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's there's some technological changes coming along, but what we're working with in Kenya, and we just launched last week, in fact, is what's known as a low-power wide area network. And what that means is that the communications from these devices, from these sensors that are going to be there, they are going to use less power, and the frequency that they transmit on, they don't transmit very much. You don't need to send data all that much. So it's a question of using lower power and sending less data than your traditional cell phone. So a cell phone, the battery lasts for about a week because it's always talking to the network. But the network we're launching across Kenya for these devices is not quite, it's not going to use as much power as that. They're not always communicating with the network. Now that's a lot of technical stuff. What it means is that the battery lasts longer, much, much longer. And if you're doing Internet of Things solutions, over the course of the lifespan of it, the power source, being connected to the mains or having a large solar array to power a device, or the battery itself is one of the biggest costs of the device. By having the low power wide area networks, that brings down the cost of the device itself, brings down the cost of the connectivity to very small amounts, less than it is for a data bundle that you buy here. It's just for sending specifically these messages. And we're talking about, if you're sending a very small amount of messages, the subscriptions can be $1 a year for sending the messages. So it's low, it's 100 bob a year. So it's low amounts of money. And that battery life extending is bringing the cost down to make the devices affordable, and it's going to change some of the possibilities for making these projects affordable and sustainable.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I take 2 questions, or 3 questions, I would like to ask Teresa a question. Okay, so what is the response of the communities you work with to this approach, your approach of livelihoods, and how far do you plan to extend these approaches to other parts of Africa?
Thank you so much for that great question. In fact, ITF is working in other countries in Africa and also in UK in terms of planting trees and supporting other community groups for the purpose of livelihood improvement and landscape restoration. And the communities are so responsive. But what is happening, they need to see benefit, tangible benefit. How are they benefiting? I know that I have visited some forests that are very intact. And the question is, how are we benefiting? Some people are farming in the forest and they are getting that food. How are we going to benefit? So there are other options. There is carbon credit, which we are still exploring. We are also exploring payment for ecosystem services. We are happy to learn from the Upper Turner project that is doing very well in that. So we are exploring to make sure that the communities have tangible benefit, so that the communities who are doing the restoration up there, upstream, at least they are able to benefit, and the communities downstream are able to contribute towards what the communities are doing upstream. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. And also, I would like to ask Esther a question. Sorry, I will get back to you. Thank you so much for funding funding rural areas, which I think is a big thing that you guys are doing. And then I would like to find out, who do you fund? I need some clarification. And do you fund organizations to go to these rural areas to undertake their project, or you have other means of doing it? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Being as a UN agency and international financial institutions, we work with the government primarily. But nevertheless, we also work with, NGOs. Depending, in fact, today we were launching one grant, which we gave them, but these are small grants. But in terms of big investments, we work with the government. And with the decentralization now going on in Kenya, we work a lot with, with devolved institutions, the local government. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Esther. Okay, now I take questions. Okay, you first. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Winfred Opio. I come from Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, and I work with the National Agricultural Research Organization. I'll start by thanking Lawrence. Thank you for being a springboard to many of us in this room today. And my question goes to Ms. Gitonga Teresa. I am wondering, are you considering urbanization, like urban areas in the project? Because most of your talk, I saw that you're focusing on the rural areas, and yet we know that urbanization is one of the biggest challenges to degradation or loss of forests and natural resources. Because as people move to urban areas, they're trying to put up homes, industries, and all that. They are definitely cutting down trees, and whatever natural resources are in those places are lost. So are you considering urban areas? And another thing I wanted to know is, as you do the reforestation, are the communities deciding on the tree species that they want to plant, or it's decided by the project that these are the available species and they are given what is available? Thank you so much, and thank you for involving school children. You said you're involving school children in the project. I think that's a great thing because they are surely the future of restoration as we talk now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those two great questions. You are asking about urbanization. Are we considering urbanization and the way they are using a lot of fuel wood like charcoal? Our training is integrated. We are training people to use energy-efficient technologies so that we reduce the pressure they are having to our forests. So that's our approach. But in terms of tree planting, we are working mostly in our water towers. We are specifically, for the 20 million, we are specifically focusing in our water towers, but again, we are doing a lot of capacity building in terms of using energy-efficient technologies. On the issue of tree species, each area is unique. The trees that survive in one area, you can't say that they will survive in other areas. So we are using the local community. Mostly we are planting the indigenous trees. And indigenous trees means that they are the trees that are locally from that area. They are native from that area. So we are planting indigenous trees mostly, but when it comes to the agroforestry, we are planting fruit trees which are not necessarily native. We are also planting other trees that are very good for agroforestry purposes, which we have naturalized in our country. So basically, we don't select trees for them. The communities are involved in terms of identifying the tree species that are locally native in that specific area. Because each area has specific, unique species that can survive based on the geographical location and also the climatic condition. Thank you.
Okay, before that, can you please make your question just one? And also to the speakers, could you please make your answers as brief as possible? Thank you. All right, you. I haven't forgotten your name.
Hello, everyone. My name is Desmond Alunwa. I'm from Ghana. I work for the Green Africa Youth Organization. My question goes to IFAD. We all have experienced the way things work when you work with government. And you did mention that, yes, you do involve NGOs. I want to know the level of involvement. How do you involve them? Is it through the government or straight you connect with them whichever country you are working? But if I can just end with this. People normally clear their lands, previous indigenous trees, either because the plants they are planting do not like shade or do not do well under those trees. So if you are planting indigenous trees back, are you giving the farmers an incentive? And then after the plants survive, who claims ownership of those trees? Thank you.
Yes, okay. I'll start on how do we work. By the way, I've just come from Ghana. I've just been here for a short period of time, so I'm very familiar with the Ghana portfolio. We work with the government, yes, because we're a UN agency. But yes, we do involve NGOs because the government doesn't have all the capacity to implement projects. Usually they have a lot of non-government organizations or private companies that help them to implement their activities directly. But where they can, they do. The government, does, within their own institutional arrangement, they will implement some of the activities of that, of those projects. Now you say that working with the government maybe doesn't work very well, but we have our own, what I would say, principles of engagement. Somebody talked about gender. There's no way we are going to implement a project that does not specifically, address issues of gender. and you know, the nature of the investments we are making, it has to be in line with what we have experienced, and you know, based on the lessons that we have learned elsewhere, what works and what doesn't work. So we work through them, but yes. And as I said, there are a few occasions where we have grants that go directly to institutions or NGOs. In a case like that, it's not a big investment. It's more like a catalytic investment so that they can identify better ways of doing things, you know. They maybe come up with better methodologies, you know, which we will use in bigger investments. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for our time. I'll take one more question, okay, from you.
My name is Lloyd Mugambi. I come from Nairobi. My question goes to Esther. Esther, you're carrying a program with the Treasury known as Profit Program. And most of us, like youths, we are unable to engage in the program because of the requirements of credit facilities that you facilitated the banking institution to offer. So I'm asking, like, as you have developed a program, how can we engage with you to share our concept and work with you by, as you said, you're giving small grant to develop what we have so that we can engage other impact investors to come in, because they are somewhere interested, but they have told us to get to package our model so that it can be viable to them. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Profit is ending next year, so you better hurry up. The first thing I'll say is, you know, get in touch with the project management unit. There's a team of people there who manage and coordinate the implementation of activities directly in the National Treasury. So if you want, we can do some bilateral to give you the contacts. And yes, in fact, that's really the way to go. We don't implement projects. We oversee the implementation, but these projects investments are implemented by the government itself. Yes. Regarding the grants again, you know, you could very easily get a grant from a project like that. Other than for us, when it comes to us, usually it's academia, it's, you know, people who want to come up with innovative ways which we can incorporate in our program so that we are more efficient, we are more impactful, so that we can make, you know, inroads into changing people's lives in the rural areas. Okay?
Thank you very much. Our time is almost up. But before that, sorry, our time is up. I would like Lawrence in 60 seconds to give us one sentence. I mean, we are standing here for young people across the globe, and say one challenging, inspiring sentence that would cut across to all of us for us to step up and take our place for restoration in 60 seconds.
Okay, 60 seconds. The challenges that we face as humanity has been caused by us. And so we are responsible for these challenges, for these problems, and also we are responsible for the solutions. And so we cannot continue to discuss these problems over and over and over again. It is high time we stood up and we formed a formidable movement and we tackled this problem head on. Okay? We should not continue to dance around the drum. Let's stand up and let's do something. If there's anything that is wrong with our continent, with our world, let's stand up and do something about it. We don't need to set goals for 15 years, for 20 years. Plastic is bad. Let's stop it now. Our lands are being degraded. What is the cost? Let's stop it now and let's do something about it. So let's put our destinies in our hands so that this world does not go in extinction. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. It was more than 60 seconds, but thank you. All right, I would like you to clap your hands for our speakers and give them a round of applause. They've done a great job. And also clap for yourselves for staying until this time and for taking up the restoration challenge. I would like to thank you all once again for making it up here, and also invite you for the next session, Block 2, which starts at 9 o'clock a.m. to 10:30. We would like to see all of you in here. Thank you for making it, and see you tomorrow. Bye.
Can I just make a small plug? Tomorrow, for those who are interested in grazing lands and landscape management in grazing lands, we have a discussion forum tomorrow, and so we'll have some perspectives from the community and those of us who work with communities, including some of our partners.
And yet another person between you and the reception. Hello, my name is Sabine. I was here in the back. And the problem is when moderators thank all the other persons in the room, they never thank themselves. And I wish to do that because the moderators you've seen today are not professional at all. These are our youth and landscape representatives. They're not even paid for this. They just get the honor of doing it. And I would like to invite you to give a big, big round of applause for Sarah and Zizi Bogue.